Yes, it is the time of the year again. My 5 pro tips in order to increase your win rate at the game, win more often, top that regional, win that regional, top that YCS, and win that YCS. And it all starts right now, so the only thing I'm going to ask from you is to like and subscribe, because it motivates me a lot to keep making videos like these. You already know it. And on top of that, I'm gonna love you forever. I'm gonna do your laundry and dishes for the next, I don't know, 15 years. I mean, I'm probably gonna marry you at this point. And I mean, let's get right into it, honestly. So, the tip number 1 is actually quite simple, but a lot of people still misplay with that. I just see a lot of people just not really understand why they should actually do something like that. But there are actually 2 reasons why you always want to use a quick play special summoning effect on draw phase very specifically, not just standby, because a lot of people will be like, oh, I only have to play around Valor, but you also have to be scared of Jewel and Logbird. Remember that Jewel and Logbird is a card that can only be used outside of the draw phase, and that is much more relevant than you actually think. So in case you're playing something like a mutant deck, and you actually get a psychic effects on a special summon that actually search, well, again, you're actually playing around 2 cards just by e-tallying on draw phase, and it's actually quite huge. So now, if your opponent actually lets your other mutant monster, the ST46, resolve, and then drills you after that, you are able to get a lot actually going, whereas if he Valored this right away on your main phase, if you use this later on, you would have had like less bodies, you would have had less effects going on, it wouldn't have been that good, you would have had just overall less cards in your hand. So, of course, this is the optimal way to play your hand out, but again, this is just tip number 1, it's absolutely less than nothing. Let's get into tip number 2. Alright, tip number 2 is actually going to be pretty much knowing how to use something like a turn player priority to your advantage, because a lot of people, again, are still very confused as to how quick effects actually function and who's the first player who's actually allowed to use those turn player priorities. Well, obviously, I just kind of spoiled it by saying turn player priorities, so who has the priority for quick effects? It's always the turn player. And yeah, I'm just going to explain that right away. But by the way, did you actually know that Magdalene was a 1-card rank 4, just generically speaking? And it doesn't actually lock you under Madolche monsters, it only does if you're using the effect of Petting Cesar to actually special summon a Madolche from your deck, so that's actually kind of shocking, but yeah, if you want to play a rank 4 toolbox in your deck, that is the way to go. But anyways, so you can actually make a Dweller just with 1 card, but don't worry, because with draw phase going on, of course, the first player who's actually allowed to use a Spell Speed 2 effect, Spell Speed 2 card, or sorry, I guess you can say, or effect, that actually doesn't really discriminate, is actually the turn player, and obviously you just drew for turn, so it's you, and then at the very beginning of your draw phase, you're allowed to use Xyz Encore. Your opponent is not allowed to use Abyss Dweller yet, because, of course, exactly just like I said, it is turn player priority. In other words, you can use this Xyz Encore before your opponent uses the Dweller. Your opponent cannot respond to the Xyz Encore, which is huge, because it also functions the same way against cards like VFD, where they have a quick effect, but they can't do anything about it. And yeah, I mean, it's just the effect of Xyz Encore. If you, in case you're still confused, read the card. It says target 1 face of monster your opponent controls that has Xyz materials, detach all of them, and if you do, return it to the extra deck. Then if there is a monster card in the graveyard among those detached monsters, special summon all of them onto your opponent's board, but they all get their levels reduced by 1. Your opponent cannot obviously activate anything in response to this card's activation. So yeah, it is the one way you actually consistently play around the Dweller, but your opponent will have, I guess, 2 monsters on the field just sitting there, so that is kind of something that you have to be afraid of. But this turn player priority doesn't actually affect just to just to Xyz Encore. It's also on stuff like Super Poly and Eradicator Epidemic Virus, in case your opponent actually summoned 2 super, like Colossus or something, in Thunder Dragon format against Sky Striker, and I had an Eradicator Epidemic Virus. If you were really scared of the virus, what you actually did was, I draw for turn, draw phase, instantly Super Poly, using your 2 monsters, instead of using your other spell cards first in order to kind of gain advantage, or stuff like that, or to use it as a way to interrupt them, because it tributes for cost, and there's no longer something that you can do about it. So you want to get rid of your opponent's monsters before they actually start using their problematic effects and cards. So that is it for tip number 2. Let's get into tip number 3. Alright, this one, honestly, I'm gonna be completely honest with you, is a gigantic one, and I see the majority of people messing it up utterly. like utterly and completely, and it's going to save your life and make you so much better at the game, and you're going to understand this in literally 2 seconds. So let's just say your opponent goes normal summon Alistair effect, normal summon Alistair effect. Those are the 3 most boring words a human can ever hear. Normal summon, yeah, just yeah. Anyways, now he's going to make Magistus Artemis, and let's just say you have something like an Ice Dragon's Prison. When he goes for invocation, what should you actually do? A lot of people would actually be tempted to special summon back the Alistair and then go banish, but what are you truly accomplishing there? They've really tunnel vision completely, and they just think, oh, only because of the fact that I can banish, I will. But remember, again, that Ice Dragon's Prison gives you a lot of freedom. You choose if you want to banish, and if you don't want to, even if your opponent has a spellcaster and you're reviving back a spellcaster, so it matches the type for type, you shouldn't actually do that. So let's just try to, show you what happens if you summon back the Alistair to interrupt their graveyard without actually banishing. What actually ends up happening is that your opponent, in case they have another Alistair in the hand, they have to use it. Now they have no Alistairs in the graveyard. This invocation is going to the graveyard. They used up 2 cards for Merkaba, so they have obviously less cards in the hand. They still had to use this as a fusion material. And yeah, I mean, they're kind of going to be in a pseudo top deck mode. And yeah, it's just so much better because if you actually use the effect to banish the Alistair, not only would they still be able to play the game in case they have Alistair in the hand, and I guess, another kind of resource, like another light attribute, maybe in your graveyard, we never know, it would have been completely so bad because they would have been able to get back the Alistair literally right after, and obviously neg infinitely less. So you want to summon back the Alistair, or use something like a Transmigration Prophecy to return it back to the deck. It's so much better than something like a DD Crow on Alistair. And also another thing that I want to mention is that there is also an argument to DD Crow the Alistair the second it hits the graveyard, instead of actually waiting until they use the invocation, because if you DD Crow them immediately, they can't use invocation, so the invocation is just sitting in the hand, and they have a banished Alistair, so they might actually have to find a way to discard that invocation if they want to use the graveyard effect to get back the Alistair to the hand, so they can keep continuing the flow of pressure, with the 1-card Alistair. Otherwise, they were going to have to rely on drawing like a Meltdown Terraforming Alistair or invocation again. Well, sorry, not invocation obviously, but another Alistair. So that's pretty much it for tip number 3. Remember to correctly use Ice Dragon's Prison and not always be tempted to use the double banish effect, especially against something like Alistair, something invoked, for example. But yeah, that's it for tip number 3. Let's get into tip number 4. Alright, so one really efficient way to clear Dragoon if you're just playing trap cards is, of course, again with Ice Dragon's Prison. Why is this card always coming up in all of my videos? Maybe because it's good? Maybe? So obviously, Ice Dragon's Prison, remember that it says you can only activate one of them per turn, and the thing is, Dragoon of Red Eyes is a spellcaster monster, and what are you sending as a material for it? Dark Magician, which is also a spellcaster. So the moment you use Red Eyes Fusion, you're actually fueling your opponent's Ice Dragon's Prison in order to banish your Dragoon, and obviously, since it threatens the Dragoon, it doesn't target and it doesn't destroy, you will have to negate the card. However, since it negates the activation, you can actually your opponent will actually be able to use a second copy of Ice Dragon's Prison. So what can you actually do in order to maximize your ability to play through multiple copies of Ice Dragon's Prison, Solemn Strike, etc.? Well, it's honestly kind of simple. Make sure that you don't have a spellcaster in your graveyard when you summon that Dragoon, or, maybe summon your Dragoon under something like Herald of Arclight, Macrocosmos, Different Dimension Ground. Always try to find ways to banish or, I guess, shuffle back your spellcasters that are in their graveyard into the deck. So, for example, if they go Ice Dragon's Prison, target your Dark Magician, you can go a Transmigration Prophecy on my own Dark Magician, and then your opponent obviously will not be going to be able to fully resolve the Ice Dragon's Prison. Your opponent's Strike will also be completely useless in this situation. You won't even have to use like Dragoon Effect to negate, because then if they chain Strike, well, the Ice Dragon's Prison fully resolves. Your Transmigration Prophecy just obviously, well, yeah, it just won't really do anything at this point. It's just, yeah, it's a really good card. It's the one way you actually beat Ice Dragon's Prison. I don't really know why I just said Transmigration Prophecy when I said Dragoon Negate, but yeah, you get the point. Obviously, Dimension Shifter is not one of the ways you get rid of the fact that you have a spellcaster in your graveyard, because it is a spellcaster itself, ironically, and it sends itself to the graveyard. So, of course, cards like DDG, that is obviously also searchable by Trap Trick, Herald of Arclight, it's relatively easy to summon in a way, and Macrocosmos is kind of like that Saki unsearchable one of, but yeah, when I do make that Dragoon, my opponent can have all the back row in the world, and it just won't do anything. Dragoon got to the point where it is unbeatable. So, yeah, that's it for tip number 4. Let's get into the final one, tip number 5. Alright, so first of all, this is like a 10-in-1, and also there's going to be a lot of extrapolation here, because you can kind of use these concepts for just generic situations. It's not going to be just Sky Striker mirrors, but there are some situations, again, like I said, where, you know, the plays that I'm going to show you are going to matter. So, in a way, very similar to tip number 1, where I said summon a monster on draw phase, so you play around Veiler and Droll and Logbird, but this time, you can actually use the effect of Ray on end phase to make the Shizuku to dodge the Veiler, but obviously that is far from it. You know, I'm going to show you so much more than that. So, obviously, the Veiler can only be used during the main phase, and my opponent tagged out into Shizuku on end phase, so I can't use Veiler here to negate the Shizuku's effect. But I see a lot of people who just go normal summon Ray, make Shizuku on main phase, pass, and then they go Veiler and they go, oh no, oh my god, you got me. No, I mean, it was definitely your fault. So, yeah. Anyways, for the Sky Striker, I guess you can get so much more technical if you play your cards right, and you don't just use effects because you can. So now we have Ray in Area 0. It would be so tempting to just go for high, like normal summon and then use the effect tag out, but it's not the correct play to do, and I'm going to show you why very specifically. Now we're actually going to play normal summon, and we're actually going to soft make the Hayate, and this matters a lot because we can actually find a way to kind of use the effect of Ray to tag out into Kagari, which is very relevant, and you're going to see why soon enough. And the one way to do that is by getting back the Ray, otherwise we're going to soft make the Kagari, well, I mean, you know, make the Kagari by using Hayate as a link material, and that's not really something that we want, and the reason for that is because Kagari would be treated as a proper link summon, and once it hits the graveyard, it can actually be special summoned back, and you will not really be able to summon back your own Kagari, but your opponent will, because of a card like Mecha Shark Cannon, which is obviously searchable by Shizuku on end phase, and as you can clearly see, my opponent has over 3 spells, well, 3 or more spells in the graveyard, so he would be able to summon back the Kagari and then just get a lot of engine cards going from there, so that's just not the most ideal thing. Yeah, I'm going to just crash on my opponent's monster. Crashing with Hayate has a lot of value. Also, don't always attack directly just because you can. Sometimes crashing allows you to do more damage and jump over more monsters, so yeah, you're going to be sending the multi-roll, revive back the Ray, and then you're going to go on main phase too, ironically. You're not going to make Kagari now, because now we can go for the Area 0 play that I actually talked about, and then tag out, make Kagari, and then obviously get a random card from the extra Excavate. It's going to be, oh, Widow Anchor, not bad, and get back the multi-roll, so this Kagari was not properly summoned, so meaning that our opponent's cards are not doing their full effect, and now we can actually make Shizuku, multi-roll, you know, set the Widow Anchor, get the end phase Shark Cannon, and again, Shizuku would get that search, and then you can actually use the card right away, banish a card from my opponent's graveyard, and then multi-roll is going to be able to reset it back. So look at how we were able to turn the tides of the battle completely just by playing correctly, and now our opponent cannot really do anything with that Kagari, so we're really just optimizing gameplay from there, but this can also be extrapolated, like I said. If you can actually, like, unproper summon your monster, you're also making yourself safer from cards like Monster Reborn, because Monster Reborn obviously can summon monster from your opponent's graveyard, not just your graveyard, and that is so much bigger than you think. Again, it's just really slept on, but it's definitely really relevant. But yeah, anyways, that's it for these beautiful tip videos. I really hope you guys were able to enjoy and learn a thing or two, and if you guys have any comments, feedback, anything, definitely let me know in the comment section below. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe. My guide motivates me so much to keep making videos like these, and that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. I will see you very, very, very soon. Peace.